If you don't reply, I'll take every pill I own. I stared at the video he sent, him crying, pills in hand, and felt my stomach drop. I called the police, not him. I don't even know where to start with this mess, but I'm desperate for advice because I feel like I'm slowly losing my mind. I've been with my boyfriend Brandon for almost 3 years now, and what started as the most beautiful relationship has turned into something that's destroying me from the inside out. We met during my freshman year when I was 18 and struggling with homesickness, anxiety, and terrible grades. Brandon was this sweet, sensitive guy who seemed to understand my pain better than anyone else ever had. He told me I saved his life. That meeting me pulled him out of the darkest depression he'd ever experienced. Looking back now, I realize he love-bombed me completely, but at the time it felt like finding my soulmate. The problem is that Brandon has severe depression and refuses to get professional help. He says I'm all the therapy he needs, that I'm the only thing keeping him alive. Every single day revolves around managing his emotions and making sure he's okay. I can't study alone, can't go to the gym, can't hang out with friends without him calling me constantly or guilt-tripping me about how depressed and suicidal he feels when I'm not there. My grades have gone from a 3.8 GPA freshman year to barely passing now. I've lost touch with most of my friends because Brandon always needs me when I make plans with them. I stopped doing photography, which used to be my passion, because Brandon said it was selfish to spend time on hobbies when he was struggling so much. I feel like I'm disappearing as a person. Last week was my breaking point. I had a panic attack during my psychology exam because I hadn't been able to study properly, and when I called Brandon crying, he somehow made it all about himself. He started talking about how my stress was making him feel suicidal, how he couldn't handle seeing me upset because it triggered his own depression. I finally snapped and told him I couldn't do this anymore, that I needed to break up so we could both get help. That's when he lost it completely. He started sobbing and saying he'd rather die than live without me, that I'm the only reason he's still alive. He's made these threats before, and I know he's serious because he's attempted suicide twice in the past year. Both times, I found him or got there just in time, and both times he said it was because he thought I was going to leave him. I tried talking to his mother Linda about getting him professional help, but she just rolled her eyes and said Brandon has always been dramatic. She told me I need to be more patient with him, that this is just how he shows love. My roommate Jessica thinks I'm being manipulated, but she doesn't understand how serious Brandon's depression is. The controlling behavior has gotten worse lately too. He wants us to move in together next semester, even though I love living in the dorms. He talks constantly about getting married and having babies, even though I'm only 21 and want to focus on school. He gets upset when I don't answer his calls immediately, shows up at my dorm unannounced, and has even started questioning Jessica about what I do when he's not around. My parents have noticed something's wrong during our weekly video calls. They keep asking if I'm okay, saying I seem different, but I don't know how to explain this without them freaking out. They raised me to be independent and strong, and I'm embarrassed that I've become this anxious, codependent person who can't make a decision without worrying about how it will affect my boyfriend's mental health. I know this probably sounds toxic to outsiders, but I genuinely love Brandon and I'm terrified that leaving him will result in his death. At the same time, I'm slowly dying inside. I can feel my own mental health deteriorating, my future prospects dimming, and my sense of self completely disappearing. I don't recognize the person I've become. How do I save both of us? Is there a way to leave someone who threatens suicide without becoming responsible for their death? I'm studying psychology, so I should understand this better than anyone, but when it's happening to you, all the textbook knowledge goes out the window. Reddit, I'm drowning here. I need help, but I don't know how to get it without potentially destroying the person I love most in the world. Update 1. I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post, even those of you who were brutally honest about what you saw happening to me. I've spent the past week reading every single response, and slowly, painfully, I'm starting to accept some hard truths about my relationship with Brandon. The first thing I did was call the campus counseling center. I met with Dr. Thompson, a therapist who specializes in trauma and unhealthy relationships, and within the first session, she helped me understand that what I'm experiencing is emotional abuse and manipulation, even if Brandon doesn't consciously realize he's doing it. She used a term I'd never heard before, suicide threats as control, and suddenly everything clicked into place. Dr. Thompson asked me to think about the pattern of Brandon's threats. Every single time I try to assert independence, set boundaries, or focus on my own needs, he escalates to suicide threats. When I want to study alone, he becomes suicidal. When I make plans with friends, he can't handle being without me. When I talk about my future career goals, he starts planning our wedding to redirect my attention back to him. She pointed out something that should have been obvious but somehow wasn't. Healthy partners support your growth and independence. They don't sabotage it. They celebrate your successes instead of making them about their own insecurities. They encourage you to maintain friendships and pursue your passions. They don't systematically isolate you from everything that makes you who you are. I started keeping a journal of incidents like Dr. Thompson suggested, and the pattern is undeniable. In the past month alone, Brandon has threatened suicide or self-harm 12 times. Every single instance was triggered by me trying to do something independent, studying for exams, going to dinner with Jessica, calling my parents without him listening in, even taking a shower without texting him back immediately. The hardest conversation was with my parents during our weekly call. I finally broke down and told them everything that's been happening over the past 3 years. My mom started crying immediately, saying they'd noticed I seemed dimmed, like a light had gone out inside me, but they didn't want to interfere in my relationship. My dad, who's usually the calmest person I know, was furious and wanted to drive up to campus immediately. The thing that really got to them was when I mentioned that both my parents are therapists themselves, which makes this whole situation even more embarrassing for me. They immediately offered to help me create what they called a safety plan for leaving an emotionally abusive relationship. Hearing my own parents use those words about my relationship was like getting punched in the stomach, but I needed to hear it. The most eye-opening conversation, though, was with Jessica. I discovered that Brandon has been calling her when I'm not around, asking her to check on me and report back about what I'm doing, who I'm talking to, and whether I seem upset about anything. He's also been showing up at our dorm multiple times when I wasn't answering his calls, claiming he was worried about my safety and needed Jessica to let him in to make sure I was okay. Jessica has been covering for me because she could see I was struggling, but she's been documenting everything in case I ever needed proof. She showed me a list of dates and times when Brandon called or showed up, and there were over 30 incidents in the past 2 months alone. She said she's been walking on eggshells, afraid that if she told him I wasn't available, he might hurt himself, and somehow it would be her fault too. That's when I realized Brandon has been manipulating not just me, but everyone in my support system. He's turned my roommate into an unwilling accomplice in monitoring my behavior, made my parents worry about my mental health, and isolated me so completely that I genuinely believed I was the only thing standing between him and suicide. I also discovered he's been lying about several major things. He's not enrolled in classes this semester, despite telling me he's finishing his degree. He's not looking for work, even though he claims he applies to jobs every day. Most shocking of all, he's been telling people we're engaged, including his family and some mutual acquaintances from high school. When I confronted him about these lies, he broke down crying and threatened suicide again, but this time I didn't immediately cave. I told him I needed space to think about everything, and he responded by sending me 47 texts and 16 voicemails throughout that night. The messages alternated between desperate apologies, declarations of love, and increasingly graphic descriptions of how he would kill himself if I abandoned him. Jessica stayed up with me all night, helping me read through them and pointing out the manipulation tactics Dr. Thompson had taught me to recognize. Dr. Thompson is helping me develop a comprehensive plan to safely exit this relationship while ensuring Brandon gets the professional help he desperately needs. The plan involves his family, campus security, local crisis intervention services, and a carefully coordinated timeline to minimize the risk of him hurting himself or escalating his behavior toward me. I'm terrified, Reddit. I'm terrified of what Brandon might do, terrified of the guilt I'll feel if something happens to him, terrified of starting over after 3 years of having my entire identity wrapped up in managing someone else's mental health. But for the first time in months, I feel like I can see a path forward that doesn't involve me slowly disappearing as a person. I know some of you are going to say I should have seen this sooner, and you're probably right. But when you're living inside the situation, when someone you love is telling you every day that you're the only thing keeping them alive, it's impossible to see clearly. I'm just grateful I'm finally starting to wake up before it's too late. Update 2: Holy shit, Reddit. I thought I understood manipulation before, but this past week has shown me depths of calculated behavior that I never imagined possible. Brandon somehow figured out I was seeing a therapist, and his reaction was so extreme that I finally understand what everyone meant about him being dangerous. I'm pretty sure he went through my phone when I was in the shower last weekend. I had been so careful about hiding my therapy appointments, but suddenly he knew exactly when I was seeing Dr. Thompson and started demanding to know what we talked about. When I refused to tell him, claiming doctor-patient confidentiality, he completely lost his mind. At 2 in the morning on Tuesday, Brandon showed up at my dorm pounding on the door and screaming that I was abandoning him like everyone else. He was yelling about how I was letting strangers poison my mind against him, and that therapists just want to break up happy couples to make money. Jessica woke up terrified, and other residents started coming out of their rooms to see what was happening. Campus security had to physically escort him off the premises while he sobbed and begged me not to let them take him away. The security officer, Mike Torres, who's also our RA, said Brandon's behavior was concerning enough that I needed to file an incident report immediately. I've been avoiding paperwork because I didn't want to make things official, but Jessica finally convinced me that documenting everything was necessary for my safety. The next day, Brandon's manipulation reached a level that still makes me sick to think about. He sent me a video of himself sitting on his bedroom floor with a bottle of pills in his hand, crying and saying he was going to end it all because I was choosing strangers over him. He said if I really loved him, I would stop seeing my therapist and come over immediately to prove I still cared. For about 10 seconds, I almost fell for it again. The old me would have dropped everything and run to save him. But Dr. Thompson's voice was in my head, reminding me that genuine suicidal people don't usually film themselves or make demands in exchange for staying alive. Instead of rushing over, I immediately called 911 and then called his mother, Linda. The police found Brandon at his parents' house about 20 minutes later. He hadn't actually taken any pills, but they took him to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation anyway. Linda was absolutely furious with me, screaming over the phone that I was overreacting and making Brandon sicker by involving authorities. She accused me of trying to get him committed because I wanted an excuse to break up with him. That phone call with Linda was actually liberating in a weird way. I finally heard someone else using the same manipulation tactics Brandon uses, and I could recognize them clearly because I wasn't emotionally invested in Linda. She tried to guilt me, blame me, and make me responsible for Brandon's mental health, but from the outside, it was so obviously toxic that I just hung up on her. This whole incident was my wake-up call about how Brandon weaponizes suicide threats. Dr. Thompson helped me understand that if someone is genuinely suicidal, they need immediate professional intervention, not a girlfriend. If they're manipulating, calling their bluff removes the power of the threat. Either way, calling 911 was the right response, and I should never have to choose between my safety and someone else's mental health. I spent last weekend at home with my parents, and the physical distance from Brandon gave me clarity I hadn't had in years. My mom showed me photos from before I started dating him, and I barely recognized myself. I looked so much happier, healthier, more alive. My face had color, my eyes had light in them, and I was smiling genuine smiles instead of the forced ones I've been wearing for months. My dad helped me change my phone number and set up completely new social media accounts under a slightly different name. They also connected me with Dr. Sarah Wilson, a psychiatrist who specializes in trauma recovery, to evaluate whether I need medication adjustments to help me through this transition. Having professional support from multiple angles is making me feel less alone and more confident about my decisions. When I returned to campus on Monday, I discovered that Brandon had been busy during my absence. He contacted 3 of my professors, claiming to be my fiancé, and telling them I was having a severe mental health crisis that might prevent me from completing the semester. He suggested they should be understanding if my work quality declined or if I missed classes. Fortunately, Jessica had already spoken to Mike about the situation, so the residence hall staff were aware of what was really happening. Mike helped me contact my professors to clarify that Brandon has no authority to speak for me and that any future contact from him should be reported to campus security immediately. Most of my professors were understanding and supportive, though I could tell they were concerned about the level of drama in my personal life. I also discovered that Brandon had been spreading rumors about me to mutual acquaintances from high school and his family friends. He was telling people that I was mentally unstable and abandoning him in his darkest hour because I'd been brainwashed by feminist therapists. Some people believed him initially, but my close friends rallied around me once they learned the truth about what had been happening. My study group partner Alex even admitted he'd been worried about me for months, but didn't know how to bring it up. He said I seemed anxious and distracted all the time, always checking my phone and making excuses to leave early. He thought maybe I was struggling academically, but now he realizes I was being monitored and controlled by someone who claimed to love me. The hardest part of this whole process has been accepting that the Brandon I fell in love with might never have been real. Dr. Thompson explained something called love bombing and how manipulative people create an idealized version of themselves to hook their victims. The sweet, vulnerable guy who needed me was a carefully constructed persona designed to make me feel special and indispensable while slowly isolating me from everything else that mattered. I keep thinking about all the red flags I ignored because I was so flattered by his intense attention and so scared of losing someone who claimed I was his whole world. But healthy love doesn't require you to sacrifice your identity, your friendships, your goals, and your mental health. Healthy love builds you up instead of tearing you down to keep you dependent. Next week, I'm going to break up with Brandon officially. Dr. Thompson and I have planned exactly how to do it safely, with multiple people aware of the plan and campus security on standby. I'm terrified of his reaction, but I'm more terrified of what will happen to me if I don't get out now. I can already feel myself coming back to life just from having some distance and perspective. I'm excited about my classes again, I'm making plans with friends, and I'm even thinking about picking up my camera for the first time in over a year. I forgot what it felt like to have hope for my future instead of just dread about managing someone else's emotions. Update 3, I can't believe I'm writing this, but I actually broke up with Brandon and lived to tell the tale. More than that, I'm thriving in ways I forgot were possible. The person I was 3 years ago is slowly coming back, and she's stronger than ever. The actual breakup was almost anticlimactic compared to all the build-up and planning. I met Brandon at the campus coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon, with Mike sitting at a nearby table pretending to study, but actually there for my safety. I had practiced the conversation with Dr. Thompson so many times that the words came out steady and clear, even though my hands were shaking. I kept it simple and direct like we'd rehearsed. Brandon, our relationship is over. I wish you well, but I won't be in contact with you anymore. Please don't try to reach out to me or my friends and family. No long explanations, no justifications he could argue with, no opening for negotiation. As predicted, he immediately escalated to suicide threats, but this time I was completely prepared. He started crying and saying he couldn't live without me, that I was killing him by abandoning him. The old me would have crumbled immediately, but I calmly said, "If you're having thoughts of suicide, I'm going to call 911 right now because I want you to get the help you need." Brandon backpedaled so fast it was almost comical. Suddenly, he was just upset and didn't really mean it. He was just trying to make me understand how much he loved me. When he realized that his usual manipulation tactics weren't working anymore, he switched to anger, calling me selfish and heartless, saying I was destroying him for no reason. That's when Mike intervened, walking over to our table and calmly telling Brandon that he needed to leave campus property immediately or security would be called. Brandon looked between us with this expression of pure rage and disbelief, like he couldn't understand how I'd managed to build a support system without his permission. He stormed out, but not before yelling that I'd regret this decision for the rest of my life. The aftermath was intense but manageable because I had an entire support system in place. Brandon tried calling me from different numbers throughout the week, but I'd already changed mine. He showed up at my dorm twice more, but campus security escorted him away both times and added the incidents to his growing file. He even tried to contact my parents, but my dad shut that down immediately, telling Brandon that any further contact would result in legal action. The most surprising thing was how quickly my life improved once Brandon was completely out of it. Within a week, I felt like I could breathe again. Colors seemed brighter, food tasted better, and I had energy for things other than managing someone else's emotions 24 hours a day. I rejoined my study group and discovered that my academic performance improved dramatically almost overnight. Without the constant anxiety and distraction of Brandon's needs, I could actually focus on my coursework. I started going to the gym with Jessica, picked up my camera again, and even went to a party for the first time in over a year. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed meeting new people and having conversations that weren't about depression and suicide. Brandon did attempt suicide about 2 weeks after our breakup, but the timing was so obviously manipulative that I felt more angry than guilty. He did it on my birthday, making sure multiple people would find him quickly, and left a note specifically blaming me for destroying his will to live. He was hospitalized briefly and is now in intensive outpatient therapy, which is exactly what he needed all along. Linda tried to blame me again, showing up at my dorm to scream about how I'd driven her son to this and demanding that I visit him in the hospital. My parents drove up that same day and had a conversation with Linda that I wasn't allowed to hear, but she hasn't contacted me since. Dr. Thompson reminded me that Brandon's suicide attempt actually proved he needed professional help, not a girlfriend, and that his recovery was never my responsibility. The hardest part of healing has been dealing with the guilt and self-doubt that still creep in sometimes. I catch myself wondering if I could have saved him, if I gave up too easily, if I'm really as selfish as he said I was. But therapy is helping me understand that love isn't supposed to be a hostage situation where you sacrifice your mental health and future to keep someone else alive. The biggest revelation has been discovering what healthy love actually looks like. I'm dating someone new now, a guy named Connor from my statistics class, and the difference is absolutely night and day. When I told Connor about my past relationship, he was horrified and supportive, not jealous or threatened by my trauma. He encourages my friendships, celebrates my successes, and actually seems happier when I'm thriving independently. Connor has never once made me feel guilty for spending time with other people, pursuing my hobbies, or focusing on my studies. He doesn't need constant reassurance about my feelings, doesn't monitor my social media, and has never threatened to hurt himself when I can't text back immediately. Dating him is teaching me that real love feels safe and supportive, not anxious and exhausting. The most amazing part is rediscovering who I am outside of a relationship. I'd forgotten that I'm actually funny, that I love adventure photography, that I'm good at making friends, and that I have opinions and dreams that don't revolve around managing someone else's mental health. I'm planning to study abroad next semester, something I never would have considered when I was with Brandon because he couldn't handle me being away for even a few hours. My grades have recovered to a 3.6 GPA, I've reconnected with old friends and made several new ones, and I'm genuinely excited about my future for the first time in years. I'm considering graduate school in clinical psychology, partly because this experience has given me insight into trauma and manipulation that I want to use to help other people in similar situations. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my original post, you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, and you shouldn't have to destroy yourself trying. The suicide threats are about control, not genuine mental health crises. Call their bluff, get professional help involved, and save yourself first. You deserve a partner who builds you up, not one who tears you down to keep you trapped and dependent. 6 months later, I'm happier than I've been in years, and Brandon is getting the professional help he always needed but refused to seek. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even if they hate you for it. Especially if they hate you for it. I'm finally free, Reddit, and freedom feels incredible.